Okay, sorry for that delay there. If there was a delay, that was a little off there. Hopefully the sound and video will actually line up in this video. I've realized that some of them they have not, and I apologize about that. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. So this video is for us to go over how to do stuff on the 2 worksheets that you're given. Okay, some of them there will be room to do it on here, and some of them there is not. Okay, so just be smart about, what you should do. Usually how much room I allow you to use on the paper if you need to do it on a separate piece of paper. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with the square roots worksheet. Okay, this will go kind of in line with the video that I made for you for 10.4. So if you kind of struggle with 10.4, it might be a good idea to go back and do this worksheet and then try to go back and look at the problems from 10.4, because this kind of is just a little bit better of an intro to that for you, in my opinion. So this video should be a little quicker because I'm just going through these 2 worksheets and what that will look like. So, starting with, like I said, this square roots worksheet here. Up here, they kind of walk you through the steps of doing these problems. This part right down here we'll focus on in just a minute for the bottom section of this worksheet, but for the time being, let's start with this stuff that's up here and these problems down here. So since I've already kind of explained a lot of this stuff here for you, by doing 10.4, we're just going to look at a few of these problems, okay? So, let's see. Let's start with, well, there's not really a great option here, but let's start with number 4. Okay, so we're just finding the square root of the number, okay, and remember our answers are always going to be plus or minus when we're taking a square root, okay? So this is 0.25, okay? We're taking the square root of it, so I'm going to go ahead and throw the square root over it. Now, when you're looking at this, okay, you may say, well, I don't know what the square root of 0.25 is. However, I bet if I were to ask you what the square root of 25 is, you would be able to tell me that it's 5, okay? I just have a decimal here, okay? So I could think about it that way and just think about it as, 0.5 being squared. But if you don't like that option and you want to use your calculator on ones like these, okay, because it's a decimal, hit a second and then your square root button. Okay, if you have a basic calculator, that's probably just a function in and of itself. 0.25. And that ends up being 0.5, okay? So remember, the square root of 25 is 5, so the square root of 0.25 is 0.5, okay? So that one is just equal to 0.5, and then I can write that in on my paper here. So number 4 is 0.5. Okay, so I'm just going to write answers on my paper. I'm going to do my work on a separate piece. These ones are pretty easy. You could probably just get away with doing them all on the paper. Okay, now, number 6, okay, we have 36 over 25. Okay, well, we're taking the square root of that whole thing, so the square root of 36 over 25, and I don't remember if I specifically made this point in your video. Algebra 2 is doing stuff with roots as well, and so I know I made it with them, but I don't know if I did with you guys. But when you have the square root of a fraction, you can rewrite this as the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. So you can split it like this. Okay, the square root of 36, hopefully you recognize that is 6 squared. Okay, so 36 is 6 squared, so the square root of that is just 6 over, and the square root of 25 is 5. Okay, now, maybe by this point you're saying, uh-oh, she made a mistake. You would be correct. I forgot up here when I did this to write my plus or minus, and I was about to forget to write this down here. Okay, so plus or minus 6 over 5. So I'm going to go fix that on my other page. Okay, so this one, number 4, should have been plus or minus, and number 6 should be plus or minus 6 over 5. Okay? Now, the one thing I want to point out, because I think I pointed it out yesterday in the video, but I could be wrong, okay? Number 7 is the square root of negative 16, okay? If you were to type that in your calculator, if you have a calculator like mine, okay, if you happen to have one, I'm just going to show you what happens, and maybe that will refresh your memory. If I did say it, if I didn't, then we'll talk about it. Okay, so the square root of negative 16, I got an error. Non-real answer. Okay, that answer is not real. We cannot plug in a negative value into a square root at this point with what we know. Okay, so that one, I'm just going to say no roots. Okay? Or actually, what I should say is no real roots. Okay, so that's that section. Okay, as far as these ones, we're just going to do these real quick. Okay, I'm going to circle the ones that you could use a calculator for if needed. Okay, if you needed a calculator, the ones that I would be okay with using a calculator for: 9, because that's not something we know off the top of our head; 10, because it's a decimal; 12, because it's a decimal; okay, 15, because it's a decimal. Now, you're probably looking at this and saying, well, she's circling almost all of them. Okay, 45 is not a perfect square. You're going to need a calculator for it. 16, not a perfect square. You're going to need a calculator for it. Okay, so 11 and 14 you should do without a calculator. Okay, the other ones that are circled you can do with a calculator. Okay, so just real quick, looking at like number 16 here, so we need a calculator for it. Hopefully that's readable. I might need to switch the paper around. Let's do it this way. Okay, so number 16 is the negative. Okay, notice this negative is outside. Okay, we can have the negative outside, just it cannot be inside. Okay, and minus the square root of 50. Okay, that gives me a decimal answer. Okay, so it wants me to round to 2 decimal places, so I'm going to round to negative 7.07 is going to be my answer for that one. Okay, and that's how you would go about doing those ones for the calculator ones. Okay, so I'm not going to do any more of those ones. You're responsible for the whole rest of the worksheet other than the ones that I do. Alright, evaluate. Now, this part right here, okay, is an intro to what we will be doing for next week's lesson. Okay, so what goes with the next section. So, this one is literally just taking these values and plugging them into this formula that's given right here. Okay, so they kind of talk about this up here, but this is the square root portion of the quadratic formula that we'll be looking at next week. Okay, so let's look at number 18. Okay, and I'm going to write this formula here on this page just so we have it. So it's the square root of b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so it's going to be really important to pay attention to the signs, okay, if it's positive or negative, and what happens to them when we have that. So I'm going to do 2 of them so we can see that. So I will do 18 to start with. Okay, so it says that A is 6, B is 4, and C is 2. Okay, so I'm just plugging these values in here. So it's the square root of B is 4, so 4 squared, minus 4 times A is 6, C is 2. Okay? Now, right here, okay, we're going to have a problem. Okay? 4 squared is 16. Okay? Minus 4 times 6 is 24, times 2 is 48, meaning that we have the square root of negative, well, 48 minus 16 is 32, so it's going to be negative 32. which we can't do anything else with, okay, because this is no real root, okay? It's non-real, but we still have to write our answer down there. So what I'm going to do on my paper, if something like that is to happen, I'm going to say that the answer was the square root of negative 32, okay? But then I'm going to say no real root. Alright? Now, the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to do 22, and then that'll be all for that particular worksheet, okay? So 22, A is equal to 3, B is equal to 4, C is equal to negative 7. So, just plugging it in again. So the square root of B squared, 4 squared again, minus 4 times A is 3, C is negative 7. Okay? Now, you're probably looking at this one and maybe you're thinking, oh, it's going to be negative again. But in this case, it will not be. Okay? So this is the square root of 4 times 4 is 16. I have two negatives here. Negative times negative is a positive, so plus 4 times 7, okay, is 28 times 3, so I'm going to have to do that over here. I don't know that off the top of my head, so it's 24, 84 it looks like, okay? Now, I have the square root of 16 plus 84 is 100, and the square root of 100 is plus or minus 10. So that would be the answer that goes in the blank for 22, would be plus or minus 10. Okay, the only reason this one up here was not plus or minus is because we're going with whatever sign is given in front of it, okay? So those ones, that's what's different. Up here, you go with whatever sign's in front of it. Down here, it's plus or minus, okay? So that's it for that worksheet. So now, let's see, let's get rid of this paper real quick. Okay, and if you guys get stuck on a worksheet, don't hesitate to send me a message and ask for help. I won't bite, I promise. I will send you an answer back. Okay. Solving quadratic equations by finding square roots. Okay, so this is a lot more like what was in your homework, okay, that you're responsible for. So I'm just going to work through these ones on this page actually and not even on another piece of paper. So, write each quadratic equation in standard form and state the leading coefficient, okay? Now, standard form is the form that looks like this. X squared plus X plus some value, some constant, okay, some just number. Okay, that's the form that it follows. Okay, so, and there can be numbers in front of here, but that's just a number. Okay, so the variables go in decreasing order, which we did stuff with that back in, I want to say, chapter 8. Okay, so we're writing this in standard form, and then the leading coefficient, okay, is the number in front of the variable that's being squared. Okay, so with number 2, okay, I need to write this in standard form. So I need to move this 10 over by subtracting it. So 0 is equal to 7x squared minus 5x minus 10. Okay, that is now written in standard form. Notice I have x squared, I have an x, I don't have any more x's. Okay, now the leading coefficient is this number that's right here in front of the x squared. So my leading coefficient is 7. Okay, let's look at number 6, okay, because this one, everything's already on the same side, but it's not in order. Okay, so with this one, that negative goes with my 9, so I'm going to have negative 9x squared. Now I need to do my x term, so plus 5x. Now I need to just do my number, plus 8 is equal to 0. Now, my leading coefficient is in front of my x squared, so my leading coefficient is -9. Okay, 9 was negative, so it's -9. Okay, so that's that section. Now, these next two sections are almost identical in what you're doing. Okay, the only difference being with this bottom section, you can use a calculator. Okay, meaning it's not going to give you good even numbers that you know. So let's look at like number 8. Okay, so we have 3x squared is equal to 507. Okay, so x squared is equal to, well, 507 divided by 3. I personally don't know that off the top of my head, so I'm just going to do that on a calculator real quick. 507 divided by 3 is 169. Now, you may or may not know that one off the top of your head. Okay, it's 13, so x is equal to, okay, now we're actually solving for a variable, so x is equal to plus or minus 13. Okay? Let's see, let's go with 12 next. Okay, I need to solve for x, so I need to subtract 16, so 4x squared is equal to 484. Okay? Now, again, I don't know that off the top of my head, so I'm just going to use a cut by 4. Okay, I would like you guys to be able to do this math in your head, okay, because you would not get a calculator like on a quiz or a test for this. So make sure you know how to do that. I'm just doing it for the sake of time. Okay, so that gives me that x squared is equal to 121. Well, I know that 11 times 11 is 121, so x is equal to plus or minus 11. Okay? I should be boxing all of my answers to make it very clear where they are. And I think that's good for that section. You should be able to do that section now. And so then for this last section here, let's just pick a couple. Let's do 18. Okay? So, again, I may want to do these on another piece of paper. But there's a pretty decent amount of room with the extra little space in between them here that you could probably do it. So I need to add 12 over because I'm, again, solving for x. So 1/2 x squared is equal to 21 plus 12 is 33. Now, this over here is a fraction, okay? It's 1/2 times x squared. Okay, so to get rid of it, I have to multiply it by 2, okay, because this is really x squared over 2, so I multiply this over here by 2 to get x squared is equal to 66, and then I would need to use my calculator to do the square root of that. So the square root of 66 is 8.124, okay, and we're rounding to 2 decimal places, so x is equal to plus or minus 8.12 with the rounding. Okay? That's why I say with the room on here, you should be able to do it. Let's see, one more. We'll do 22. So 7x squared plus 14 is equal to 63. Okay, so to get x by itself, I first need to subtract 14. So 7x squared is equal to 63 minus 14 is 49. Now I need to divide by 7, so x squared is equal to 7. And now I can take the square root of that, so the square root of 7 is 2.645. Okay, that 5 is going to round it up, so x is equal to plus or minus 2.65. Okay, so if you write big, you probably need to do the work on a separate piece of paper and just write your answer underneath. Okay, but when you submit your homework, I need to see your work and your problem. So if you do it on a separate piece of paper, make sure you submit that stuff together. Okay, my Google number is on that paper I gave you, so that's probably the best way for you to ask me a question, just because I won't be checking my email all the time, but I will see that pop up on my phone pretty frequently. So hopefully that helps you get through these worksheets, and that's all the stuff that's due this Sunday.